Thank you for having me. So, I guess I'll start off by talking about myself for about a minute. I promise I'll be quick, and I have a rather short presentation, so I won't be too long. So, I come from maybe 10, 15 years of thinking a lot about scholarly communication and collaboration, authoring, data sharing, and pre-publishing as well. So, in my previous life, I was a researcher, and I was working. I'm trained in astrophysics, but I really always worked at the intersection of information science, data science, and astrophysics. The interesting part is that not only I was a researcher, of course, writing, publishing, submitting, and going through all the different pains of being a researcher and having to deal with submission workflows and very difficult collaboration workflows for authors, but I was also thinking about scholarly communication and data sharing in my PhD as an information scientist. I was also very early on working with CERN, that was like 12 years ago, maybe 13, on the very first task force around open access. So I've been involved for the last 10, 15 years in just pushing new ideas around the future of scholarly communication, the future of papers. And what I'll talk about today is really like the future of preprints, or at least I'll try to lay out the foundation for what the preprint of the future might look like. And as you can tell from my title, I'm really interested in the word PDF, because I think PDF is really one of the biggest bottlenecks and roadblocks that really don't allow research content to go to really become data-driven, web-native, HTML-first, more computable and malleable, and modern in a way. So what I'll bring to the table today is my experience as a researcher, also as a co-founder of a startup called Autoria that was really built around making authoring more collaborative and data-driven. So I don't think I could have asked for a better set of presentations this morning with the three researchers that talked about their experiences and emerging trends and their needs when it comes to research, because they really talked about a lot of the different aspects that I'll talk about today when I talk about preprinting. So I'll be referring a lot to them because I think it really makes sense to ground my presentation in all their work. So first off, let's see how I go to the next slide, like that. So first off, one thing to understand, as you heard in the previous talk, is that in the previous talks, is that preprinting is clearly on the rise. And an important thing to note is that it's happening whether you like it or not. Clearly it has implications for publishing and for publishers, and I think that what I'll try and, the point that I'll try and make today is that publishers should really look at it as an opportunity. So is it a friend or a foe? Well, it's really irrelevant because it's happening no matter what. So let's take it as an opportunity. That's, I think, the point that I'm trying to make today. So just some data to show you what, how preprinting has evolved over time. So I come from the field of astrophysics, so of course I knew about preprints before I even knew about publishing. This is an actual fact. Preprinting is, by and large, the main vehicle of dissemination of ideas in astrophysics and in physics. And as you can see, it's also been on the rise, also because it's been implementing and including more and more disciplines over time. So we're now at a rate of around 10,000 papers per month that are posted to the archive. SSRN has been around for about the same time. Now it's at around 5,000 publications per month, although a lot of them are resubmissions, I think. And bioRxiv, so the interesting thing here to note is that, of course, there's been life science preprinting, or preprinting in the life sciences over time, but really with the emergence of the bioRxiv that you can see right there in 2015, I think, is that you see really a spike in preprinting within the biomedical sciences. So the question I'd like to ask, since I'm trained in physics, is why was the archive and why is the archive still today so successful? So I think we can really point out a couple of different areas. So the first one is technology. As you know, the archive actually predates the web. It was an email server to begin with. And so physicists started using this crazy typesetting tool called LaTeX, which is a nightmare if you know it, and it's a nightmare even if you don't know it. The great thing about LaTeX, though, is that you can really write an entire paper, and it's source code. So while a PDF or a PostScript file is very large in size, LaTeX can be extremely small. So this allowed physicists to really exchange papers in a really lightweight way. The second component about technology is that the archive looks and feels like it's a site that was made in the 1990s, because it was made in the 90s and it still looks like that. If you look at SSRN, until recently, it was pretty much the same. That's actually a strength, even though it does what it does, and that's it. I think the most important aspects, though, are around community. So as I said before, I come from physics and astronomy, and I come from a traditional, from an environment in which there's a long-standing tradition of data sharing, open access, open science, and collaboration. Most papers that come out of physics research or astrophysics have, tens, hundreds, sometimes even thousands of co-authors. So it's a very collaborative environment, and we tend to share data and everything we have as soon as we have it. So the interesting thing about preprints is that they're also natively open access. This is before even open access existed. The archive was already doing open access. I've never heard of a preprint server that is not open access. So I think that's an interesting thing to keep in mind, that it really is at the root of the success of the archive. So the one thing I'd like to point out is that this really opens up an opportunity for publishers to look at preprinting as a real interesting experimental testbed, where a lot of new ideas around the future of publication, moving beyond the PDF, can all emerge within this ecosystem. So I'm passionate about HTML-first, web-native publications, data-driven publications, computational notebooks included within articles, and all these things are things that can emerge within the preprint ecosystem. Why is that? Because the preprint ecosystem and pre-publishing is detached enough from traditional publishing workflows that can really open up and can become a place where all these things can be experimented upon. And this is, by the way, what the researchers this morning talked about. So I just want to, for example, go back to what these three systems that we have here, just to mention, the most popular preprint servers: Archive, SSRN, bioRxiv. So Arthi this morning, she talked about the importance of having data shared as part of the workflow. So that's one request that she had for publishers, and one thing that she said it's an emerging trend. And the reason she wants data sharing is for maximum reproducibility. So if you look at these three preprint servers, they don't have any data support whatsoever. She also talked about alternatives to single and double-blind peer review, so to open up to new ways of doing peer review. Again, none of the systems really have a peer review system that is alternative or complementary to what publishers have. Casey talked about the importance of DOIs for preprints, actually specifically in the case of preprints, because he wants to be able to be cited on preprints. I think that none of the systems actually allow DOIs for preprints. He also talked about the bio overlay and the fact that they're experimenting with new ways of doing peer review. And finally, I was very excited to hear Jim talked about the digital humanities, and he was the one who talked about computational notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, Python code, visualizations, multimedia objects such as sound. By the way, these are all great things that are happening in research, and none of these preprint servers enable those. So the rest of my talk, which is really the next 5 minutes, is really, so I'm very happy that I prepared this talk before, and then this morning the three researchers actually talked about specifically every single thing that I have up here. So these are 5 themes, 5 ideas that I think are important for the way that preprints will be in the future. So let's start with the first one. It's DOIs for everything. I think Casey made it clear. He said, why do I even have to publish this? I can probably just leave it up on a preprint server and keep updating it. So that's already happening, and Crossref now allows a type of DOI for preprints. So it's really important that all preprint servers will mint DOIs for preprints. Why is this important for publishers? Because publishers will eventually publish some or probably all of those preprints, and it's important to make the connection back so that you know that a preprint is allowed, it's valid content, and it correlates, it links to an actual publication in a traditional journal. So the second part, which is the part that I'm really excited about, is to move fully beyond the PDF, and preprint servers, I think, can be a place where we're going to start seeing more and more papers that are HTML first. Why is this important? Because papers that are in HTML can be shipped around different systems in a much easier way. They're also machine readable, which is great because it's year 2018, and they're discoverable. Means that if you actually do a search for the content inside the paper, you don't have to come up with acrobatic strategies in order to understand what's inside a PDF. So openness, as I said before, it's something that is naturally part of preprints. As I said, I don't think there's one preprint server that I can think of which is closed access. So everything you build for around preprint servers needs to be open. But why stop at open access if you can actually do open data and open science? So I think preprints are going to be the preprint servers, the very first places where we're going to start seeing more and more data deposited alongside the actual content, text and images. Things like Jupyter Notebooks and any other kind of R code, D3.js, and any other kind of more dynamic, multimedia, data-driven content. So peer review, sorry about the imagery. I don't even know why I picked that one. I was just going through images. But so I'm not trying to suggest that preprints need to do peer review. Peer review is, of course, the business of publishers. And however, there's an opportunity to allow, especially if the content is in a HTML first format, it really, we can really allow more open types of peer review discussions. And again, I'm not trying to say that this needs to replace traditional peer review, but it can complement and be something to add upon and really increase the quantity and possibly the quality as well of peer reviews that you get, and that peer review can then become an integral part of the actual preprint. And then finally, I think that if you go back, I don't think the researchers mentioned this today, but it's interesting how I think none of the systems, at least not the archive doesn't really allow any publication of alternative metrics. The point I'd like to make here is that, especially for preprints are all about disseminating scientific content as fast as possible. So they naturally are, part of social media systems. If you have a new preprint, the first thing you'll probably post it on Twitter. So it's important that these metrics about social media impact will actually become part of the preprint servers. So just to conclude, I think that my take as a former researcher is that preprints are happening no matter what. So I think that one of the best things for the move for publishers is to really, first of all, allow them. That's a great first step. And then really start building modern technological stacks so that there's possibility for integrations. And as preprint servers move towards more HTML first, data-driven, computational publications, it's also a great opportunity for publishers to really allow this works in progress with all this new computable, media-rich content to become part of the final publication. And I'll stop there. Thank you.